Is the Department of Veterans Affairs finally changing? For decades, the VA has been a symbol of systemic failure, a bureaucratic labyrinth where the promises made to those who served often vanished into endless paperwork, delayed appointments, and the chilling silence of unanswered phone calls. We have watched scandal after scandal, wait time manipulation, construction cost overruns, claims backlogs stretching into years. Yet true, structural accountability always seemed to slip through the cracks. But something fundamentally shifted in 2025. This isn't just a new administration or a minor policy tweak. This is a comprehensive, system-wide mandate driven by legislative action, technological leverage, and, crucially, the unwavering pressure of veteran advocacy groups who finally forced Congress's hand. The question is no longer if the VA will be held accountable, but how. The mechanisms of that accountability are reshaping the entire organization. We are looking at 7 massive, undeniable shifts that are fundamentally changing how the VA operates, and the first one rips the veil off the darkest secret of the agency: the opacity of its data. The first, and arguably the most revolutionary change-driving accountability in 2025, is the Digital Transparency Mandate. Often called the Sunlight Act by those who championed its passage. For years, the VA controlled the narrative by controlling the data. Wait times were reported selectively, claims processing speeds were cherry-picked, and internal performance metrics were guarded like state secrets, only surfacing during congressional inquiries or whistleblower leaks. This created a culture of plausible deniability. If the public couldn't see the true extent of the failure, administrators couldn't be definitively blamed for it. That era is over. The Digital Transparency Mandate requires the VA to publish in real time and on publicly accessible dashboards a comprehensive suite of performance indicators that are both unfiltered and easily digestible by the average citizen, and most importantly, the veterans themselves. We are talking about granular data, broken down not just by region, but by individual facility and even specific service line within those facilities. Think about the power of knowing, minute by minute, the average wait time for a primary care appointment at your local VA medical center compared directly to the national average, or even compared to the private sector averages in the same metropolitan area. This level of visibility transforms accountability from an abstract concept into a measurable, immediate consequence. If a facility director in, say, Phoenix, Arizona, sees their average claims decision time spike from 120 days to 180 days, that data point is now instantly visible to the press, to veteran service organizations, VSOs, and to every single veteran waiting for a decision. There is no hiding, no spinning the numbers, and no waiting 6 months for an internal report to confirm what everyone already suspected. This instant visibility creates a critical feedback loop. It empowers VSOs to target their advocacy efforts precisely where the failures are most acute, moving away from broad national complaints to laser-focused, facility-specific demands for improvement. Furthermore, this mandate extends far beyond just appointment wait times. It includes real-time budget expenditure tracking, showing exactly how funds allocated for specific programs, such as homelessness initiatives or specialized mental health treatments, are being spent. And crucially, how much of that money is actually reaching the veteran versus being absorbed by administrative overhead or wasteful contracting. The psychological shift this creates within the VA is profound. Suddenly, every regional director, every hospital CEO, and every claims processing manager knows that their performance is not just judged by their boss, but by millions of watchful eyes. This constant public scrutiny acts as a powerful deterrent against complacency and encourages proactive problem-solving before a negative trend becomes a public relations disaster. The technology underpinning this is sophisticated, utilizing secure, non-identifiable data aggregation tools that feed directly from the VA's internal scheduling and claims systems, ensuring the data presented is raw and unadulterated. This transparency, however, is not without its challenges. Critics initially argued it would expose the agency to undue political pressure. But proponents countered that political pressure is exactly what is required to fix systemic failure. When the data shows irrefutably that a specific VA hospital has a 40% higher rate of medication errors than its peers, the justification for immediate intervention and leadership replacement becomes undeniable. This first step, the mandatory real-time exposure of performance metrics, is the foundational layer upon which all other accountability mechanisms are built. Without this unfiltered visibility, every other reform would eventually be undermined by obfuscation and selective reporting. The digital transparency mandate ensures that when the VA fails, everyone knows, immediately and with verifiable proof, making the next change absolutely essential to keep up with the public pressure. The second seismic shift, directly addressing the decades-long nightmare of bureaucracy, is the implementation of the All-Abas Bio De-Accelerated Claims Processing Act D. BioHond, which leverages next-generation artificial intelligence and automation to fundamentally eliminate the backlog. For too long, veterans' lives have been put on hold, sometimes for years, waiting for compensation decisions that determine their financial stability, their access to specialized care, and their overall quality of life. The old system was manual, paper-intensive, and relied heavily on human raters, sifting through thousands of pages of medical records, often leading to inconsistency, error, and burnout among the very people trying to help. The 2025 Act shifts the paradigm entirely. It mandates the deployment of sophisticated AI systems designed not to replace human decision-making, but to act as a hyper-efficient triage and evidence-gathering engine. Imagine a system that can ingest thousands of pages of military service records, private medical documents, and VA treatment notes in minutes, cross-referencing keywords, identifying patterns of service connection, and flagging critical evidence that a human rater might miss in a hurried review. This AI doesn't make the final service-connected determination, but it prepares a fully synthesized, evidence-based package for the human rater, highlighting exactly where the relevant information lies and suggesting the appropriate rating schedule code. This dramatically cuts down the preparation time, allowing the human expert to focus solely on the nuanced judgment call, rather than the tedious task of hunting and gathering. Furthermore, the Act establishes legally binding, mandatory decision timelines that are aggressively shorter than anything seen before. Initial claims must now receive a decision within 90 days, with complex claims requiring independent medical examinations having a hard cap of 180 days. Crucially, failure to meet these deadlines triggers immediate internal reviews and, for the first time, financial penalties tied to the operational budget of the specific regional office responsible for the delay. This introduces a financial incentive for speed and accuracy that was previously absent. The system also incorporates a rapid appeal review process. If a claim is denied, the veteran can immediately submit a request for a high-level, automated review that checks for procedural errors or overlooked evidence flagged by the AI. This cuts down on the years-long wait for the Board of Veterans' Appeals. The technology involved is cutting-edge, utilizing natural language processing, NLP, trained specifically on millions of historical claims decisions to ensure consistency and fairness. The fear that AI would lead to automated denials was mitigated by extensive oversight and the requirement that every denial must still be signed off by a human rater who has reviewed the AI-generated summary. The true genius of the Accelerated Claims Processing Act is that it attacks the root cause of the backlog, inefficiency, and inconsistency by providing tools that make it physically impossible for the system to move at the glacial pace of the past. When combined with the digital transparency mandate, the VA can no longer hide the claims backlog. They must solve it, and they now have the technological mandate to do so. This massive investment in technology, however, only works if the people using the system are protected when they speak up, leading us directly to the third crucial pillar of 2025 accountability. The third dramatic change is the PONT, enhanced Whistleblower Protection and Reward System. A direct response to the historical culture of fear and retaliation that characterized the VA for decades. In the past, employees who dared to expose fraud, waste, or dangerous patient care practices were often punished, demoted, or fired, while the executives responsible for the failures received bonuses or were simply transferred to other high-paying positions. This created a toxic environment where silence was incentivized and accountability was stifled at the source. The 2025 system completely flips this dynamic. It establishes an independent, non-VA oversight body, the Office of Veteran Systems Integrity, OVSI, tasked solely with investigating and protecting whistleblowers. This means VA leadership can no longer internally manage or sabotage the investigations into their own departments. If an employee reports systemic manipulation of wait times, for example, their report goes directly to the OVSI, which operates outside the VA chain of command, ensuring impartiality and security. The protection mechanisms are robust, mandatory, immediate paid administrative leave for the whistleblower while the investigation proceeds, with the option for temporary relocation or job transfer, if requested by the whistleblower, ensuring they do not face daily harassment. Furthermore, the Act introduces significant financial rewards, up to a percentage of the recovered funds or documented savings, for information leading to the exposure of major fraud or systemic waste exceeding a certain threshold. This financial incentive transforms reporting from a heroic, career-ending sacrifice into a protected, potentially rewarding act of professional integrity. Crucially, the legislation also imposes mandatory, severe penalties for retaliation. Any supervisor or executive found to have retaliated against a whistleblower faces immediate termination, a lifetime ban from federal employment, and potentially criminal charges, depending on the severity of the action. This mandatory penalty removes the discretion that previously allowed high-level officials to escape consequences. This new system creates internal accountability that is proactive, not reactive. It encourages employees who see systemic failures, whether it's dangerous sanitation practices, fraudulent billing, or intentional obfuscation of performance data, to come forward, knowing they will be protected and potentially rewarded, rather than ruined. The combination of external transparency, Shift 1, and internal integrity, Shift 3, means the VA is now being scrutinized from both the outside and the inside, creating an inescapable net of oversight. But accountability must extend beyond the VA's walls, especially given the increased reliance on private care, which brings us to the fourth major shift. The fourth critical element of the 2025 accountability framework targets the often unregulated world of private sector partners through the Community Care Quality Control Initiative. The VA Mission Act, while intended to give veterans faster access to care outside the VA system, inadvertently created a loophole for poor quality. Veterans were sent to private doctors who sometimes lacked specialization in military-related trauma or to facilities with substandard care, yet the VA often escaped responsibility because the care was technically delivered externally. This led to a fragmented system where quality control was inconsistent at best. The 2025 initiative closes this gap entirely. It mandates that any private provider or facility accepting VA community care payments must adhere to the same rigorous quality metrics and patient safety standards that apply to the VA's own facilities. This isn't just a paperwork exercise. It involves mandatory, real-time data sharing. Private providers must now report key performance indicators, including readmission rates, infection control data, and specific patient satisfaction scores, directly back to the VA's centralized public-facing dashboard, linking back to Shift 1. If a private clinic consistently scores low on veteran satisfaction or demonstrates poor outcomes, the VA is mandated to immediately pull that clinic's eligibility to receive VA referrals. Furthermore, the VA is now held legally responsible for ensuring the quality of the care delivered through its community care network. If a veteran suffers harm due to negligence at a private facility referred by the VA now shares the liability, forcing the agency to take a proactive role in vetting and monitoring its external partners. This includes mandatory specialization requirements. For instance, orthopedic surgeons treating service-connected injuries must demonstrate specific experience or training in military-related blast injuries or complex polytrauma, rather than just general practice. The most powerful tool in this initiative is the instant disqualification trigger. If a community care provider is cited for egregious malpractice or licensing violations by a state medical board, the VA system is automatically alerted, and that provider is immediately stripped of their ability to accept VA patients, preventing the slow bureaucratic process that often allowed poor providers to continue treating veterans for months after their failures became known. This ensures that the expansion of choice does not come at the expense of quality, forcing accountability onto the private sector that benefits financially from serving the veteran community. This focus on immediate, high-quality care is most urgent in the area of mental health, which leads directly to the fifth transformation. The fifth monumental shift is the FONS, Mental Health Crisis Response Overhaul. Recognizing that in the realm of mental health, delays are not just inconvenient, they are lethal. The historical model of scheduling veterans struggling with acute mental health crises for appointments weeks or even months out was a catastrophic failure, contributing directly to the tragic rates of veteran suicide. The 2025 overhaul mandates a radical shift from scheduled elective care to an immediate, crisis-focused intervention model. The core accountability metric here is simple: zero wait time for immediate crisis intervention. Every VA facility is now required to staff and operate 24/7 in-person crisis response teams, ensuring that any veteran presenting with a mental health emergency is seen immediately by a specialized mental health professional, not an intake coordinator or a general practitioner. The funding for this initiative is ring-fenced, meaning the money allocated for mental health crisis teams cannot be diverted to other administrative needs, a common historical problem. Furthermore, the overhaul focuses heavily on specialized care access. It mandates a drastic reduction in wait times for highly specialized services, particularly those focusing on post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and traumatic brain injury, TBI, which requires specific expertise often lacking in general mental health clinics. Accountability for this metric is tied directly to the facility director's performance. Contract, a concept we will explore shortly. If a facility consistently reports wait times exceeding 7 days for a specialized PTSD intake appointment, the director faces immediate review and potential termination. The system also integrates community resources more effectively. Through secure shared data platforms, the VA crisis teams are now connected in real time with local veteran service organizations and nonprofits that specialize in peer support and immediate housing assistance, ensuring that the intervention is holistic and addresses the veteran's immediate environmental needs, not just their clinical symptoms. Most powerfully, the new system mandates the public tracking of suicide prevention metrics. While respecting privacy, the system tracks the utilization rates of crisis services, the follow-up rates after a crisis intervention, and the demographic data related to critical incidents. This data, reported under the Digital Transparency Mandate, forces accountability at the highest levels. If regional suicide rates trend upward, the VA leadership responsible for that region cannot simply deflect. They must publicly account for the failure of their crisis response systems and implement immediate corrective action plans. This shift transforms mental health care from a secondary, often underfunded service into a primary, life-saving mission with measurable, high-stakes accountability. However, none of these systemic changes would hold up without the final, most direct attack on entrenched incompetence, tying performance directly to executive careers. The sixth and perhaps most disruptive change introduced in 2025 is the CHOW Leadership Performance Contract System. Historically, senior VA executives, regional directors, and hospital CEOs often retained their positions despite documented, sustained failures in patient care, claims processing, and budget management. The accountability mechanism was weak, relying on lengthy bureaucratic processes for removal or simply allowing failed leaders to resign quietly with full benefits. The new system ends this practice entirely. Under the Leadership Performance Contract System, every senior executive's tenure, salary, and eligibility for bonuses is tied directly and legally to a set of 5 non-negotiable, publicly reported key performance indicators, KPIs. These KPIs are 1. Average wait time for primary care, 2. Claims decision accuracy and speed, 3. Patient safety incident rate, 4. Mental health crisis access rate, and 5. Overall veteran satisfaction scores, measured independently. These contracts are not merely guidelines, they are legally binding agreements. If an executive fails to meet the minimum acceptable thresholds in 3 or more of these KPIs for 2 consecutive reporting quarters, their contract is automatically terminated. There is no appeal process based on political maneuvering or internal favoritism. The system is objective, data-driven, and unforgiving. This introduces a level of high-stakes performance management that the VA has never experienced. Suddenly, the regional director knows that if their facility's claims processing time, KPI 2, spikes, or if their mental health crisis access, KPI 4, lags, they are not just facing a stern memo, they are facing the immediate loss of their career. This incentivizes proactive, aggressive problem-solving. Leaders are now required to spend less time managing internal politics and more time fixing the actual problems that affect veterans. Furthermore, the contracts mandate a significant portion of an executive's compensation, up to 30%, be tied to performance bonuses that are only paid out if the facility exceeds the national average in these 5 core areas. This encourages high performance, not just minimum compliance. The legislation also streamlined the removal process for cause. If an executive is found to have manipulated data, which is now far more difficult thanks to the digital transparency mandate, or retaliated against a whistleblower, the removal is immediate and irreversible, ensuring that ethical behavior is as critical to job security as performance metrics. This system effectively creates a meritocracy at the top of the VA hierarchy, ensuring that those in power are those who are demonstrably capable of delivering on the promises made to veterans. But performance measurement is only half the battle. The other half is ensuring that the veterans' voices are the ultimate judge, which brings us to the 7th and final pillar of accountability. The 7th transformative shift focuses on empowering the veteran directly through the veteran feedback and immediate redress mechanism. For too long, veterans' complaints were treated as nuisances, logged, filed, and often forgotten in the bureaucratic abyss. The system was designed to absorb complaints without requiring genuine, timely resolution. The 2025 mechanism changes this by making every single formal complaint immediately visible and actionable. When a veteran submits a formal complaint, whether it concerns a billing error, a rude staff member, or a procedural failure, that complaint is instantly logged into a centralized public tracking system, again linked to the digital transparency dashboard, though anonymized for privacy. This system assigns a mandatory redress timeline based on the II severity of the issue. A simple billing error might require resolution within 7 days. A complaint about dangerous care might require resolution within 48 hours. Crucially, the system tracks not just whether the complaint was acknowledged, but whether it was resolved to the veteran's satisfaction, verified through a mandatory follow-up survey. If a facility consistently fails to resolve complaints within the mandated timeline, or if the veteran satisfaction scores regarding complaint resolution drop below a critical level, this triggers an immediate flag on the facility director's performance contract, linking back to Shift 6. This makes veteran feedback a high-stakes metric. No longer can a regional director ignore a flood of unresolved complaints. Those complaints are now a direct threat to their job security. The system also mandates a veteran advocate response team at every major facility, staffed by dedicated personnel whose sole job is to facilitate the resolution of complaints and act as a liaison between the veteran and the specific department causing the issue. This team is insulated from the departmental management, reporting instead to the centralized OVSI, Shift 3, ensuring they are genuinely advocating for the veteran, not protecting the facility's interests. Furthermore, the mechanism introduces a systemic failure trigger. If multiple distinct complaints in a short period point to the same underlying problem, for example, 3 veterans complaining about the same piece of faulty medical equipment or the same incorrect medication dispensing procedure, the system automatically escalates this to an emergency review, bypassing standard bureaucratic channels. This allows the VA to identify and correct systemic flaws instantly, before they lead to widespread harm. The veteran feedback and immediate redress mechanism ensures that accountability is not just measured by internal metrics, but is constantly being tested and refined by the ultimate judges, the men and women who rely on the system. These 7 shifts, digital transparency, accelerated claims processing, enhanced whistleblower protection, community care quality control, mental health crisis overhaul, leadership performance contracts, and veteran feedback redress represent the most comprehensive, aggressive, and data-driven reform effort the Department of Veterans Affairs has ever undertaken. This is not reform by suggestion, it is accountability by mandate, backed by legislative force, enabled by cutting-edge technology, and enforced by the threat of public exposure and professional consequences. The fundamental change in 2025 is the shift from a culture of internal management and self-reporting to a culture of external, measurable, and unavoidable responsibility. The VA can no longer hide its failures, delay its responsibilities, or punish those who expose its flaws. The system is designed to reward competence and integrity while penalizing incompetence and obfuscation. For the millions of veterans who have waited patiently, often desperately, for the VA to fulfill its sacred obligation, 2025 marks a turning point. It's the year the promise of accountability finally became a reality, etched into law and enforced by the unforgiving logic of data. The question now is whether the agency can sustain this momentum. The technology and the laws are in place, but true cultural change requires persistent vigilance. The responsibility now falls to the veteran community and the public to ensure these dashboards are checked, these whistleblowers are protected, and these performance contracts are enforced, ensuring that the accountability that finally arrived in 2025 doesn't fade into just another historical footnote.